One of the goals this week is to really understand place value and how to write numbers with words and with expanded form and with standard form. So there's a lot of language there. We're talking about words, and if you look at example number 1 here, it gives you the words here, and it says the number of interest is 5 and 65 hundredths. So whenever you see the word and, Jenny, do you know what that means in a number? Do you know what you put there in between the numbers? No idea. How about you, Reed? It looks like you do.
You put decimal.
Decimal. Does that sound familiar? So I don't really know if everybody remembers that or even learned it, because you guys came from about 5 different schools. So when you read a word, to figure out the number, that's a really good thing to look at first. Is there an and in it? So if there is, that's going to be your decimal. Okay, so then the next thing is you're going to look for the last part of this, and the hundredths. Since it's hundredths, that's, if you look at the chart, here's your decimal right here, and then tenths, hundredths are 2 decimal places. So this particular number has a whole part, and the whole part is 5. And then it has the tenths and the hundredths together make 65 hundredths. And there's a decimal. So one thing is just being able to translate from the words to the number. But the other thing you should be able to break that into something that we call expanded form. The standard form of this number in words is just 5 and 65 hundredths. That's how we read it. The expanded form is when you take that number and break it apart. See if I can break it apart. Sometimes it'll shake apart. Wow, not very cooperative today. Usually I can pull them apart, but this time I have to do it that way. So if I take this little chart and I slide these numbers apart and I take this decimal and just bring it down everywhere. So I've taken the digits apart. Do you see that? Then I'm going to fill in and write this number in expanded form. So it's 5 wholes plus 6 tenths plus, since this 5 is in the hundredths column, there has to be 2 digits. I put a 0 there. Plus 0.05 hundredths, or 5 100ths, which we write with a 0.0 and a 5. That's called expanded form. That's something you guys should be able to do, because if you can do that with a number, then you can understand the parts of it better, like how to say it in words, how to say it with numbers. So on the second one, now that we've kind of talked about this, when and where is the decimal? Like, it's 32 and 35 thousandths. So how would you write that in standard form? You could say the digits one by one.
32.
Right. Yep. Yes. So how would that look? 32 point, is there a 0 or is it just 25? Right, because it's tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So that 25 has to end here. So that means the 5's here and the 2's there, which means you need to put a 0 there. Let's get that? So if you were going to put that in a chart, over here, I'd have 32 and 25, I'd have to end in the thousands column. And if I take that whole thing, I should be able to pull it apart and write it in what we call expanded form. So now look at what happens. I've got to take that decimal. That was funny. I got to put the decimal everywhere. Let me get that back to where it's supposed to be. So in other words, there's going to be a number, but I'm going to fill in with zeros. So I have 30 plus, what's next? 2, right. And Rachel, what comes after the 2? Yes, because you don't need this 0 since it doesn't have any value. So plus 0.02, and Betty, what comes after the 0.02?
After the 0.02 is 5.
But you have to have the decimal, and the 5's way over there, so it's 5,000. So how do you write that?
I don't know.
Try it. Just take it. Yes, like she did 200ths with a 0, 2.
5,000.
Right? So what would I need to put here and here?
0 to 5,000.
Just 0, 0. So let me show you. When I look at that number, you have 30.0 plus 2.0 plus 0.02 plus 0.005. You're taking the number and you're adding it all up. So over here you get a 5, and then a 2, and then a 0, and then a 2, and then a 3. See what I just did? I'm taking this number and I'm writing it in all the pieces added together. That's called expanded form. Lola.
For expanded form, can you so for 0.02, can you add that extra 0 on the?
Yes.
Or
like right here?
No, I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
You could, but you don't need it.
Okay.
So sometimes you'll see people fill everything in with zeros, but it can be a little hard to look at. And so I don't do that, but that doesn't mean that it might, I think it doesn't help everybody, but it might help you.
Because I kind of use it like 20 plus.
Right. But it would be 30 plus.
Right.
Why don't you do this one for me? Try it.
Okay.
See, and listen to what she says and be polite, but let's listen to what she says and then we can see if we agree or disagree.
Well, like starting with that.
Starting with, how would you write it in the chart?
So I would start at the 10.
Right.
And do like 65.
65.
Point, so, and I would, put 0, 0,
0, 4? Look at where you ended.
Oh, 100. No, just 0.
Okay, so look at why I wanted you to use that table. If you use the table, you can kind of cross-check your work, right? She ended with thousands. That number is 65 and 4 thousandths. So we want 65 and 400ths, right? So we're going to put the 4 there. So that's standard form, 65.04. If I were going to separate it, I would think of it like this. Just as a little kind of visual. So what do you do with that, Lola?
Well, I did 60 plus 5 and
Yeah, that's right.
60 plus 5 and then plus 0.04.
Right. So, because to get to this decimal over here, you've got to have a 0, because the 6 is in the tens place. So 6 tens is 60. and then 5 ones is just plain 5, no tenths, and 4 hundredths has 2 digits, so you've got to have a 0. So it's 60 plus 5. You could put plus 0 if that helps you, but you don't have to. And in fact, you usually just see it as 60 plus 5 plus 0.04, or 4 hundredths. Thumbs up or thumbs down? How are we doing on this? Any better? Sideways? That's really all we have time for today. It's not in your homework, so I want you to let it stew, think about it, and we'll do a few more tomorrow on this sheet. So what I want you to do that is related to your homework, although this thinking helps you with the words of your homework, is on the other side of that sheet, I want you to take about 8 minutes to do these 2 pages, just like what we talked about in the notes. Okay? Check your answers for the first page. I did the words, and I did the fraction, and I did the shading. So, Paul, how much should I shade in for number 1?
You just shade in 5.
5 squares, right? Okay, just like that. Okay? Lori, what about number 2?
Number 2 would be 3 times and then
Right?
right as a fraction would be 3 times.
Okay, and how much did you shade in?
3 squares.
3 squares, right? Okay. So your shading doesn't have to be artwork, guys, because you don't want to waste too much time shading. Just kind of edit it clear. And then, well, like, I went out of the lines, you can go out of the lines, you know, we're just trying to give a good visual of understanding. But I know sometimes you can get caught up in drawing over and over. We want to move right on. Shade and move on. So looking at the first page, if I make that a little bit smaller so we can see the whole page. Are there any questions on that? The fraction down there is 9/10. Okay. How many people are still working on the second page? Okay, so take another minute to work on the second page. If you're not, if you're already finished, take a look at page 82 in your book and make sure you can find those problems and see, you know, how they tie into the lesson. And we'll wrap up in a minute. Okay, let's check the second page. You might not have gotten all of these, but look at the ones that I have here. How do the shadings look? Good. Good? But they match your answer? Yeah. Okay. And then the word 65 hundredths. Can you read that back there? 6 hundredths and 70 hundredths, but also 7 tenths is a good answer there. Because remember, one row, they're stuck together. Oh, there they broke apart. One row is a tenth. And then, here's something I want to say. With the pictures, you don't have to write simplified fractions, but in your homework tonight, you should, when there's no picture, always simplify. So, how did I get to 5/20ths? What did I divide by? Oh, how did I get to 5/20ths? That's wrong. That doesn't make any sense. What can I simplify by there? Yeah, I can simplify by 5, so I wrote 5. Divide by 5 and 65 times what? 5 times what is 65? Yeah, Andrew, 13. I should have had 13/20ths. Oops. So in your homework tonight, simplify unless you see a picture. So fraction form for the second one is 6 100ths. That reduces to 3/50ths. And 7 tenths or 70 hundredths reduces to 7 tenths. How about these? Okay? Okay, there's one thing in the homework that we didn't talk about, but it's super straightforward. It may need a little clarification. If I asked you to write a decimal like 0.4 in fraction in a fraction form with a negative, what's up here? It's just a negative number. We will talk more about negative numbers. But yeah, you're just going to write negative 4/10. And that reduces by what? What goes into both of those? 2. So it's going to be negative 2/5. So if there's a negative in front of the number, leave the negative in front of the number. I know you maybe talked a little bit about it last year. We're going to talk a lot about it this week. Okay, Marcus. Yes. All the way simplified on the homework.